What's going on, fellas? This is Hot and Cold Takes number 7, where you guys give me your controversial lifting related opinions. I let you know what I think of them, let you know whether I think it's a hot take, whether I think it's a cold take. Maybe I can slip in a little bit of practical lifting knowledge in there depending on what the question is, and we just have a good time. Thank you guys for putting your controversial takes in here. As usual, some of them not all that controversial, some of them not great opinions. That's exactly what we're looking for, wide variety. So appreciate you boys. We're going to get straight into these. The first one, and I actually really like this one. We're going to get into why I like it, but you're better off following one YouTube fitness person who's mostly right and committing to that methodology rather than following 12 and splitting hairs to be optimal. Now, this, I think, is a really good take. I've speculated things like this in the past where I've said lots of the people that learn tons of information, they can relay back to me a really impressive amount of knowledge about lifting, but then they train like an idiot because they're mixing and mashing a bunch of different methodologies without really understanding how they might fit together coherently. And probably worse than that, they're rotating things so often in their pursuit of optimal that they're never actually getting to enjoy the benefits of any of the legitimate methodologies that they're rotating between. They're never doing any one of them for long enough and working hard at it for long enough to reach the benefits. They'll go, okay, well, I'm training like Brian Alsruhe one week and I'm doing this the other week. And the problem is any one of these things, if applied well, would have gotten them really, really solid results. Maybe after applying yourself to the one specific methodology, you run into where it's got some limitations for you. And that's where we need to draw inspiration from elsewhere. But I have said many times, and this is not an advanced routine, but I think there's a lot of really smart guys out there that if they just copied the Ronnie Coleman training program verbatim, would be getting better results than what their more nuanced approach right now is getting them, simply because they would stop changing things so often and they would get to enjoy the benefits of a routine. And so I think the same thing could be said for like an information source. The problem is lots of us here on YouTube have this idea, this incentive to put out novel ideas. So even listening to the same person, you could easily fall into the trap of chronically changing things so often that you don't get to get stronger. But yeah, stick into one methodology that's pretty good. Maybe it's not perfect. Will probably outperform a rapidly changing methodology in the pursuit of perfect, even if the things you're bouncing between are all valid. Just finding someone that's mostly right. Because usually the fact that 90% of it's right and 10% of it's wrong, that's not what holds people back. Usually people run into consistency issues with diet issues, with intensity issues, with exercise execution issues before the optimization of their program is really the rate limiting factor. So I don't think it's foolish to try to optimize things. I think that doing the best we can, shoot for perfect. And when you fall short, you'll be pretty goddamn good. I don't think that's a wrong methodology, but I also think that trying to find like super small and inefficiencies in your program is probably stepping over $20 bills to pick up a nickel. The $20 bills being, okay, well, how are we doing the exercises? What's our nutrition like? What's our sleep like? So that would be my thoughts. I think that's a pretty good take that probably would be controversial depending on who you present it to. The next one is strength versus hypertrophy. The strength versus hypertrophy argument has become tiresome. With a mostly sick, obese nation, all manner of lifting and experience should be encouraged. Whatever introduces you to lifting, be it chasing numbers or chasing a beach body, and will not necessarily hold you there in perpetuity. It's a journey. Yeah, so like regardless of what you get into it for, you can change any point. I tend to agree with this. I don't even know if this is that controversial. I think most people would agree with this. Whatever gets people in the gym, lifting weights, deriving the many benefits we know come from resistance training, the better. I tend to agree. The whole strength versus hypertrophy argument at the end of the day is just one person saying, well, I like this, and the other person saying, no, you idiot, I like this. And it doesn't really often go much past that. So I tend to agree. It's tiresome. Hot take, but maybe doesn't get the certified controversial opinion seal of approval. The next one, I think the people that are locked into lifetime intermediate group of lifters are usually a self-fulfilling prophecy from labeling themselves that. They would probably begin the process. They would probably begin to progress if they didn't slap a label on themselves. brought it into their training and focused on having a fun time. I tend to agree. I don't think what they label them, the people that we outside looking in are like, oh man, you're stuck in that intermediate phase. There's a lot of, God, I could probably make a whole series on reasons people get trapped in that lifetime intermediate bubble, whether it be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't think they labeled themselves as a lifetime intermediate. I think they labeled themselves as someone with poor genetics, when in reality, more than likely, it's a bell curve. Their genetics are probably somewhere in the middle, and the reason they're stuck in the middle isn't their genetics, but they label themselves that. And as you said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They come into their training expecting not to make forward progression. I think you could often say that people get to that lifetime intermediate status because they refuse to take their outside the gym variables somewhat seriously and start treating themselves at least a little bit like a strength athlete. So they're just making it as far as hard work alone can take them. Maybe they're not working that hard. Maybe they're constantly changing things. I would say that's one of the most common things is the lifetime intermediate that knows a lot of different things but can't put it together coherently, is rotating between them, will get kind of permanently frozen in that intermediate stage when really they should be making that progression towards being advanced. I think some people would say, well, oh, if they're not progressing, then that means they're advanced. That can't be our definition. There are people that are plateaued at like a 1 plate bench press because they have such a horrendous diet and they sleep 0 hours. That athlete, while their rate of progression has slowed, is a beginner. You need to move past beginner level habits. They've got beginner level technique, right? So it's like, yeah, you could plateau at 155 if you're doing everything poorly. That doesn't mean you're now advanced because your progression has now slowed down. You're still a beginner in many regards. It means you need to do other things better. And I've talked about on Brownlee's podcast how I think beginner, intermediate, advanced, to me, it's a rating of process. Like it's the culmination of your technique, your intensity, your diet, your sleep, your mental approach to training, your programming, structuring. All of these things kind of average out to, okay, this guy's pretty at beginner level. If he's failing to progress, he just needs to do better at these things because his process is beginner level. Or you could have a guy whose numbers aren't that crazy, but I look at his stuff. I'm like, oh, you got a good diet. You take your sleep seriously. I can see your form is good. I can see your focus is great during training. Maybe this is a higher level for your genetics. That's fine. I got all the respect in the world for that kind of person where I can look and say, okay, well, your process is high level. I feel comfortable calling you advanced. Just the same as there could be a very, very strong guy who just happens to be a genetic freak who trains like an idiot. He's got terrible technique. He doesn't take his diet seriously. And somehow he's mangled his way to a 2K total. I wouldn't call that guy advanced. I would call that a strong motherfucker, but I would not necessarily call him an advanced strength athlete. So I think there's lots of things that can get you stuck in that lifetime intermediate category. Lots of them are mental. Lots of them are an inability to be honest with yourself in your appraisal. You're like, no, I'm pretty good with my diet. But it's really, if I followed you around, if I was invisible and I sneakily followed you around, your diet's trash. Let's be real here. You follow your diet 1 out of 3 days. Trash. Failing grade. Come on. You can't say, oh man, I'm coming up to the limits of my genetics. Trash. You go to bed at 2 a.m. because you're scrolling through Instagram to look at nothing you care about. Trash. Fix that. Be honest with yourself. And I think that a failure to be honest with yourself about those things and a failure to align your priorities is one of the reasons someone might get stuck in that lifetime intermediate category. Because like we talked about, intermediate is largely a gauge of process. And a failure to move to an advanced level of process is usually a failure to be objective with what we need to do better to keep ourselves moving forward. So those would be some thoughts that come to mind. Hopefully I didn't say anything that comes off as too elitist. The next one. Bodybuilding should be the first strength training modality taught to a beginner after maybe basic calisthenics, even if one's lifetime goal is to be strong AF. Build that strength base while feeling good about improving one's physique, which keeps them in the gym. Better kinesthetic awareness and connective tissue conditioning as well. I've got mixed feelings on this. There's no point where it's too early to start learning good technique on the fundamentals. I mean, there's no reason someone shouldn't be learning a good bench press technique. There's no reason someone shouldn't be learning these basics, foundations of strength training if strength training is their goal. That being said, I do tend to agree beginners should probably be doing a wide variety of exercises. As we get more advanced, the specificity of our training needs to go up to keep getting better. So it's like, it used to be that my squat would go up, but squatting was only a quarter of my leg day. Then it would be filled with other leg accessories, but my squat was going up and up and up. And as I've gotten more advanced, a greater and greater percentage of that total work needs to be done on things that look a lot like the squat, things that are being done in the squat rack. So that specificity raises with time. We may as well take advantage of this lower required specificity to get better when we're newer and do a wide variety of movements, improve our proprioceptive awareness, as you mentioned, start developing a mind muscle connection and learn how to connect with all these different muscles, because that's a skill that's going to help you down the line. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't also be doing some basic strength training to begin the session. So I don't think slapping labels of like bodybuilding, this is bodybuilding training, this is strength training. Let's just call it training. At the beginning, we do some squats and then we do some legs. I don't think we need to start with like a pure bodybuilding routine. I think we could start being happy with our numbers progressing, and we could be happy with how our physique is progressing if we just do a full leg day that contains a little bit of strength training, a little bit of hypertrophy training. So I don't even think there's a need to say like what label should we slap on optimal beginner training, and there isn't really optimal beginner training. They're going to get better basically regardless of what you do. Maybe there's some things that we can select that's going to set them up for future success. And a lot of that's just what skills they learn early. And there's skills that come with different approaches. Starting out with 5x5 teaches people how to progressively overload and dig deep for reps, and how to grind, right? Like doing that, like linear progression 5x5 teaches people a lot of basic skills of strength training. Starting with bodybuilding training. Teaches people these basic skills of mind-muscle connection and proprioceptive awareness and how to blah, blah, blah. There's lots of benefits from each of them, and we should probably be melding together these training things rather than selecting one of them to try to get the benefits and set that person up for as much future success as possible. The next one, chasing dots, Wilks, IPF points, etc., keeps lifters from being as strong as they can be. Well, definitionally, for sure, because in terms of absolute strength, we would all just bloat max, and that would lead to the highest absolute strength. But yeah, I would say I think that chasing short-term dots /Wilks /IPF points does hold lifters back from having an even higher career competitive peak, because maybe in the short term, going up a weight class, you're going to be less competitive, but filling out your frame, you might find that you actually, once you spend another 2-3 years training there, you actually have a higher dots the one weight class up. It's allowed you to progress in such a way that you're actually more competitive. But if we stay really short-term minded, we're always going to be looking at that lighter weight class because we're more competitive here, we're more competitive here. I have a hard time imagining myself being competitive one class up. So certainly I do think some people hold themselves back, especially with a short-term fixation on dots. But to be diplomatic, as always, I think some people hold themselves back by thinking dots doesn't matter at all. Dots kind of tells us, again, it's maybe some level of an indicator of mastery of process. People who think dots doesn't mean anything at all and are just bloat maxing for strength usually end up being over-reliant on that chronic surplus. And it's kind of a crutch for the fact that they don't necessarily have the best grasp on how to get stronger without it. And if you're just disregarding that, you could not be realizing, hey, man, I'm really over-relying on this. I'm actually getting less competitive as I go up. Yes, my numbers are going up, and yes, I'm climbing up the rankings of who's got the heaviest bench press at this YMCA, but I'm actually becoming a less competitive strength athlete because I'm gaining weight disproportionately to the rate that I'm getting stronger. So I think that the complete disregard for dots can also be an issue. I think dots is a pretty good formula. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, I think it's solid. I think most of the people that don't like it are very heavy lifters that like to think that they are better than a similarly skilled lighter weight class lifter automatically, when that's just not how weight classes work. I think dots is pretty decent. Next, biceps are the most underrated muscle for being generally strong in life. In strength training circles, it can be frowned upon training the biceps as they don't help as much with the main lifts and they are seen as show muscles. But whenever you have a manual labor job and need to move things around the house or even grapple with someone to protect yourself in a fight, having strong biceps is a big advantage. I'm not saying that they're more important than other muscles, but they are shunned too much. I think this is a pretty reasonable take. I like your clarification. You're not saying they're the most important. You're saying they're the most underrated, and I tend to agree. I think I've mentioned a few times that one of my favorite things for grapplers is to just do a lot of towel pull-ups, work the biceps, the lats, the grip, just that general pulling strength, and sandbags. And again, both of these things are developing strength and endurance in the biceps. And I would say the endurance qualities are just as important as the strength qualities when we look at what our biceps might be asked to do anytime we're carrying something in front of ourselves. It's both strength and endurance qualities that matter. And I think that if we're trying to train our biceps to have that cool little real world strength, I think that is going to inform what motions we think are the most relevant. Because if we think, oh, it's just pure strength, we might be hammering heavy barbell curls. But if we go with this idea that, no, it's more strength endurance that I'm being asked to task with these, maybe we are going to be picking more things like heavy front carries, which will smoke your biceps if you do a bunch of work on those heavy. So I would say I totally agree. That's a hot take. I would say it's probably controversial. Certified hot take. I think that if we realize that, we should probably address it in ways such as those heavy front carries, heavy Husafel carries, stone loading, just moving sandbags in general. I find build the real world strength qualities of the biceps a little bit better than just doing a traditional bodybuilding style approach to curls. Not that that doesn't work. I think this idea that curls are inherently just the least functional thing ever, I think that we wouldn't accept that as a valid answer for any other muscle group, really, Yeah, deadlift isn't the exact same thing as picking up an odd object, but if you can deadlift a lot of weight, you probably have a lot of the general properties that are going to let you pick up a more cumbersome, less heavy object. Certified hot take, I agree, and actually controversial. Very good one. Next one. Bro splits are fine as long as you hit each muscle group twice. I'm assuming per week. You're just lining up your workouts to avoid injury. It's not rocket surgery. I don't know. There aren't formal definitions of these things, so I'm not going to slap you with the really obnoxious internet guide. Actually, this periodization means this. There is no really concrete definition for many of these things. Just like how some people argue, this is a French press. No, this is a French press. No, this is a this is the this. Holy shit, there isn't a formalized definition. We're not really at a point where that's a thing. We're just kind of functioning off of like common colloquial understandings. That being said, I do not understand that to be the definition of a bro split. So when I was earlier in lifting, it was originally posed that like PPL was an alternative to the bro split. Back then, the rhetoric I heard was the bro split was breaking up your muscle groups into like single body parts per training session. You have an arm day, you have a chest day, you have a shoulder day, a back day, a leg day, something like that. That would be a bro split. And inherently to the bro splits, by bifurcating our training up a bunch, we would probably be hitting each muscle group once per week. The detriment being the lower frequency, the benefit being the amount of work we can do per body part in that session might be a little bit higher. And then like something like PPL was posed as an alternative to the bro split, saying, oh, here, this way you could hit each major muscle group twice per week and stimulate growth a little bit more often. And most people would probably benefit from that. I think from there was a rise in the popularity of full body training routines and upper lower routines. And people would start breaking up their splits in a little bit more creative ways where they're like, oh, no, I do like arms and shoulders, chest and back, legs, whatever it is. People would break things up different ways. My understanding is that bro split means that like hyper separation of specializing on a space, like a singular muscle group per training session. So to me, if it's hitting everything twice a week, I wouldn't really call that a bro split. That's just allocating things super reasonably. I don't think that is what I would call a bro split. But I tend to agree. If you're hitting things twice a week, probably doesn't matter all that much as long as it's working for you. The next one. The general strength training population would benefit more from a 4-day lifting split. They would have more time to fit in cardio and GPP and would also have more time to do other things with their time, possibly prevent burnout issues. I don't know, burnout's super individual. Some people just love being in the gym, and I don't think being in the gym more often would necessarily burn them out. There are lots of people that just like being in the gym 5-6 days a week, and they get quite annoyed if they're not in there. So I would say the burnout thing, pretty person to person. I don't know if I would make a sweeping statement like that. I think for some people, actually going more often is actually more helpful for preventing burnout because it just becomes a habit. It just becomes part of existing. Is most days I go to the gym after work. It's not a question. If you're training 4 days and you're moving those 4 days around each week, you're having to ask yourself the question of, am I going to the gym each day? And I think if you're asking that question, that inevitably for some people leads to selecting no more and more often in this gradual process of burning out. Whereas if it's done every day, it's not really a question. So I think in some regards, don't know, they could fit in more cardio. I don't know. I think most strength trainees that I see, 5 days. If their life stress isn't crazy high, if they really enjoy being in the gym, I would say most commonly, I think 5 days is kind of where I see people getting the best results. So that would be my personal opinion. Now we have 2 directly conflicting hot takes. One, most people hit a plateau because of poor sleep/eating, not because of the training. And then counterpoint from Scood, training to failure and not tracking your workouts is the biggest limiting factor for why people don't progress in the gym. It's surprising how early you can start banging your head against the wall. So we're going to start with 1. Most people hit a gym because of poor sleep/eating habits, not because of the training. I don't agree. If I look around the gym, I think the first thing that stops people from making meaningful progress is the fact that they are not training hard enough. I don't see enough people hitting that minimum threshold of training difficulty to really take advantage of it. And I think you can make it a bit further than you'd think you should be able to with pretty trash nutrition and pretty trash sleep if you just train like a fucking dog. If you get in there and you get after it, you can get a little better than you should. Even a guy with, like, let's say his goal is hypertrophy, let's say his goal is strength, you make it a little further than I intuitively think you should if you just fucking get after it. Usually if you're just getting after it and you don't have those outside the gym variables, you do eventually hit a hard plateau, or you kind of, okay, well, I get hurt often. When I'm not hurt, I still progress forward, but I get hurt often. Usually that's how I think it would most commonly manifest, and most people don't meet that threshold of difficulty. But that being said, here on YouTube, we have a space of a little bit of a selection bias. If you're going and watching a bunch of YouTube videos, you're more likely to be someone that's passionate about lifting, and you're more likely to be in that group of people that you like training hard. You've hit that first, like, I train hard. That's the minimum. And if you're surrounded by other people in this space that also hit that minimum, and the people you talk to are the people at the gym that train hard, I would tend to agree. The next thing that stops people is not taking their outside the gym variables seriously. And then I think the nuances of the programming would come third. Like, first, you got to train hard. Second, then let's start treating ourselves like a strength athlete and trying to recover a bit, and sleeping well and eating well. And then we could probably start running into the limitations of poor programming and starting to need to refine that. Obviously, you don't need to wait to do these things in this order. You can do all of these things together, and you should work on all of these things in tandem. But I would say that's kind of the order I see the most commonly holding people back. So I don't agree that the first thing that holds people back is the sleep and eating. I think that's the second. Then the other person's take, training to failure and not tracking workouts are the biggest limiting factors for people, why people don't progress in the gym. So I think a lot of people in the gym would be a lot better if they were training to failure. Obviously, if you don't have your sleep dialed in, you don't have your nutrition dialed in, you don't have your technique dialed in, training big compounds to failure and just drilling trash motor patterns, probably not a great long-term plan. But I will say, if I look around the gym, if everybody was taking their sets of tricep press downs to failure and their hamstring curls to failure, I think they would get better results. So in some regards, I think not enough people are doing enough sets to failure. And that's kind of the first thing that holds people back. But I do agree with your second. Not tracking workouts, I think, is a very easy way to help people understand that they need to bring some level of effort every session. You can't just like, I feel like this today. So I would say first half of that, I don't agree. I think more people should train to failure on their ISOs and they would get better results because of it. Second point, I do agree that not tracking workouts in any capacity is a big limiting factor for a lot of people in the gym. Paris says more people should be doing barbell rows over things like chest supported rows. I think that just depends on what you're doing them for. I and especially Paris have been vocal advocates for chest supported rows to localize fatigue. I think it just depends on what you're doing them for. If we are doing them as a supplemental motion for the bench press, i.e. antagonistic work for the bench, I definitely would advocate for doing things with a chest support. And if we're doing them as assistance work to the deadlift, I would definitely select the thing that more closely mirrors the deadlift, where we're working on our bracing, we're working on maintaining our like pelvic position, our rib cage position, we're working on building that GPP and that work capacity in the midsection, getting familiar with this bent over position, and building position specific strength on the upper back. So I would say it just depends. If it's kind of in there as antagonistic work for the bench, awesome. Hop on the chest support. More power to you. I'm not going to call you soft. If we're doing it to supplement the deadlift, pick the harder exercise. Be a man. Do the bent over barbell row. If your back really can't handle it, it's not just a bracing issue, and you wouldn't benefit from fixing the bracing, post your hand on something, do some heavy dumbbell. You're going to spare your lower back a good bit and still have to work on that bracing. And the reason it works is because it's fucking hard. So that would be my opinion. And also, Max wanted to include in here, most people should probably be barbell rowing a little bit less weight than they do. And I tend to agree with that. Looking around the gym, I think most people have a little bit more weight on the bar than they probably should for a barbell row. It's not to say that they shouldn't be working hard, because going heavy is not synonymous with working hard. We want to be able to have the intensity to push ourselves really hard and the discipline to do so while maintaining really strict form. These things need to happen in tandem to one another to truly be training hard. Just going heavy and not having any discipline to maintain your form doesn't make you more hardcore. The next one, fuck man, I haven't had any time to think up any awful takes. Damn. Be ready for the next one. I expect better. The next one, Goober tricep training is superior to incline curls. Well, I think tricep training is better than bicep training. That's my personal opinion. Yeah, I agree. I haven't really watched that whole incline curls yay or nay videos yet with Joffrey and natural hypertrophy. I might watch those while I'm warming up today at the gym today. The next one. This is one I don't really know. I've already run through this in my head. Minimalistic beginner strength training programs like Starting Strength are overhated on this side of YouTube. They shouldn't be considered powerlifting programs. Throwing in some arm and delt isolation, which is just one task, using my terminology, very cool. You get bonus points there. Fixes the bodybuilding concern for a beginner. Yeah, I mean, it's got pros and cons. Is it probably overhated? Maybe. I really don't know. Like I said, I haven't really specialized in optimizing the training of beginners to set them up for future success. I more so have my speculation as a guy who works with mostly late intermediate, early to late advanced lifters, looking back at what they did prior and seeing, okay, well, this guy did this and it set him up for success. This guy did this and it didn't set him up for success. I think that like a 5x5 routine does teach you how to push yourself. It does have you working on some basic fundamentals. Like you're working on the basics, the squat, the bench, the deadlift, the row, the overhead press. You're mastering these fundamental movements of strength training, which is awesome. I think that if your goal is bodybuilding, like your goal is bodybuilding, I would not start out on starting strength. I think that starting into a bodybuilding routine, starting strength is called starting strength. It's starting strength training. It's a strength training routine. And I think it's not a bad introduction. It does teach some good fundamentals. Maybe there's other things that it doesn't teach, but it's not a terrible introduction. That being said, it's not a bodybuilding routine. It's not called starting bodybuilding. I think starting to get into a nuts and bolts bodybuilding routine and start learning how to connect with each muscle, how to feel each muscle, how to start learning how to apply that intensity and discipline to a wide variety of different motions, get that proprioceptive connection with the muscles, would probably be a better use of time early if your goal is bodybuilding. There's no reason you have to wait till you're at X level to get into bodybuilding. Much the same, if your goal is strength training, you don't necessarily need to start with a bodybuilding routine. You can start with starting strength. That's fine. So I don't know. I'm not a big part of this discourse of like optimal beginner training. So I don't know. I do see hate for it. I don't see a lot of people advocating for it anymore. So maybe potentially overhated, maybe hot take. I don't know, but it would not surprise me. The next one, minimalism and barbell only training approaches hurt your lower body growth for hypertrophy. So this is probably a good take. I tend to agree with this. I've mentioned many times, I feel like you can get a pretty diesel upper body with a barbell only routine, or like maybe not barbell only, but like home gym basics you can get pretty jacked through your upper body. If you do some barbell curls, you do some barbell skull crushers, you do pull-ups, you do overhead presses, you do bench presses, and you do barbell rows, you can get pretty goddamn diesel if you're just working hard on these things. You're putting in your volume, you're eating your food, you're sleeping, and you're just living like a monk, and you're going out to your garage gym and you're doing those things. You get pretty jacked. You're probably leaving a little bit of rear delts and lateral delts on the table, but you can build a pretty well-rounded upper body based on these big compound motions. But maximizing lower body without machines is a little bit difficult because, yeah, we put in our high bar squats. Maybe we do some split squats. There isn't really a practical way to, and we do our RDLs, but there's not necessarily a great way to train our calves as hard as we would like to. There's not really a great way to train knee flexion as hard as we would like to. There's not really a great way to train our adductors. So yes, you could get jacked legs, but I think you're going to be leaving more on the table in terms of maximizing your growth if we're sticking to this like barbell only routine. I think Evan Centopani, who I like quite a bit, I think I would describe his training as like borderline minimalist, created a home gym during lockdown. And he found, okay, wow, I'm really liking my upper body workouts. I feel like I'm able to do all of these basics and it's getting me jacked. He was a pro level, Olympia level bodybuilder who usually just did most of his training off of basic fundamental exercises. Not to say that training is superior to people who use more machines or maybe a little bit more complex training, but it seemed to be pretty competitive with it, to be honest. But he did find very quickly in his home gym, he's like, my leg workouts are kind of lackluster. I need to get a hamstring curl if I really want to maximize my leg growth. I'm a professional bodybuilder. I know what my leg workouts need to entail. I need that hamstring curl. I very much would like a leg extension, and I would very much like some kind of squat machine where I'm not limited by my low back. And so he got a hack squat, a leg curl, and a leg extension. And then, so he kind of deemed that necessary where I don't think he's got any upper body machines. So I tend to agree with your take. Hot take. I do think barbell only training for bodybuilding tends to limit the lower body growth a little bit. Now, minimalism depends where we define minimalism. If you told me, hey, Sam, all I do for my legs is a standing calf raise machine. I do hack squats and I do hamstring curls, maybe some RDLs. So 3 to 4 motions. I never really rotate them. Sometimes I rotate my target rep ranges, but I got these things in my garage. I got the hack squat out there. I got the calf raise out there. I got really lucky. I found a deal on Amazon and I just go out there and bust my ass. I think 3 to 4 motions, I think that qualifies as minimalist training. And I don't think you're leaving that much on the table. Like, yes, some direct adductor training would probably make your legs a good bit bigger. But I think that qualifies as minimalism and might not be leaving as much on the table. But I very much agree with your take that barbell only training is probably leaving a bit on the table, leaving a bit to be desired for lower body development. Now, the next one, you get a certified hot take medal. Next one, probably skewed. And I also think people would disagree with that. So I think if I'm giving out certified hot take medals, it's got to be controversial. And then I also think I agree with it. That's where we're giving out the hot take medals. The next one, probably skewed because I go to the gym with 80% university students. I've been there. I think about half the people going to the gym recreationally would be better off doing some other sport they actually enjoy. Many seem to just go to the gym for their conscious and because it's the thing you're supposed to do. Motivation being non-existent, the amount of people holding conversations mid-set. You know what? I think this is a really good take. I think that you're going to get the benefits of exercise from a wide variety of things. And like, if we're just looking for general health effects, yes, there's cool things that resistance training does. And yeah, maybe, and if we're trying to optimize health, more people should be exposing themselves to resistance training. But we're going to get a ton of these benefits from engaging in any physical activity on a regular basis. So doing the thing that you enjoy is what's going to keep you in there long term, because you could say, oh, well, we get these bone mineral density benefits from lifting weights. Well, we do get those for running as well to a lesser extent. So the biggest problem is people burning out and then not engaging in the exercise at all before we worry about what's the optimal exercise for health. And I think people are less likely to burn out if they're doing something they enjoy. I wholeheartedly agree with this. If someone hates going to the gym, that's fine. I don't think going to the gym is mandatory. I don't think lifting weights is mandatory. I think that exercising in some capacity is just part of being a human, or it should be. So it's like if you like rock climbing, and you maybe go to the gym once a week as like a supplement to your rock climbing, just to work on some like pull-ups and some other things that might help you out. Awesome. Kick ass. You're going to get the vast majority of those health benefits. If you like playing pickup basketball, Awesome. Maybe you come into the gym a little bit just to try to like do some knees over toes stuff, maybe some prehab, keep your lower body and knees and ankles feeling good. Awesome. More power to you. Do things you like. I agree with this. I think this is a hot take. I think there are some people that would disagree with this because they're like, oh, well, lifting weights is the most optimal form of exercise in the world. So people would disagree. I agree with you. Hot take medal awarded. Next one. You shouldn't wear a belt for your first or second or 1 or 2 years into training. You shouldn't wear a belt. I think learning to brace yourself and you may be selling yourself short getting a belt too early. Now this is a mixed bag for me. A, absolutely hits the criteria for controversial. But B, it's never too, using a belt is a skill, and it's never too early to learn that skill. It can actually help people learn how to brace when they were struggling to without the belt, and maybe they learn to brace with the belt, they take the belt off, they're like, oh, I know how to brace now, that's awesome. God, that's a mixed bag because some people, I think, delay the process of learning to brace because their back feels a little funky. So they just crank their belt on. They don't really understand how a belt works. And they think, I've got this belt supporting my lower back. My lower back is invincible. I'm going heavy today. I'm going to crank my belt one tighter. And they delay learning how to brace. So those people, yeah, they would have been better off just not having the fucking belt for a year or two and being forced to learn how to brace because they didn't have this perceived band-aid. But that being said, some people don't get a belt and also don't learn how to brace. So I don't think that inherently is going to force you to. And that being said, there's also no reason to not start learning that skill early. Maybe you notice, hey, I only know how to brace with my belt. Maybe on my secondary day, I'll leave off my belt and work on that because I perceive that to be a deficit within my training. Or you're like, oh, no, I feel pretty strong without a belt. Or I feel like I'm getting nothing out of the belt. Well, maybe I wear the belt on both days because clearly I'm not great at that skill. So this does hit the criteria for controversial. And I sometimes agree with it, but I can't give you a certified hot take because I don't think it's ever too early to learn to use a belt. I think the person just needs to take responsibility within their own training and say, hey, do I feel like I'm over-reliant on the belt and would I benefit from a secondary day of reduced equipment? Or do I fucking suck at using my belt and I should probably just keep it on because my beltless strength is solid and wearing a belt's only going to increase my core activity? Kind of depends. Certified medium take. The next one, the modern X-taper look. The modern X-taper looks awful for natural lifters. Leg training should be more focused on athletics, and the size shouldn't take away from the upper body. If I'm reading this right, you are saying to keep your legs smaller so they don't make your upper body looks bigger in comparison. Lame. Maximize your lower body size. This isn't a bodybuilding channel. I don't give a damn about ratios between the upper to the lower. I think being big and strong and looking big and strong is about as far as I take the whole aesthetics thing. And I think having big old legs makes you look strong. So I disagree. I also think that you can get some really impressive wheels. Even with average genetics, below average genetics as the natural lifter. If we're training through a big range of motion, we're hitting our fundamentals, we're hitting our standing calf raises, deep squats, hack squats, leg extensions, lunges, hamstring curls, RDLs, and we're just wrecking our legs and we go home and we eat and we sleep. I think that's one of the muscles you can get goddamn impressive, natural. Maybe if we look and compare ourselves to these dudes on gear, compare yourselves. I am one of the dudes on gear at the gym, full disclosure. But if you're comparing, you're like, oh man, I'm happy with where my upper body's going. I'm very proud of where I'm at for a natural lifter, but I know it's realistic that I'm not going to look like that guy who's been taking trend for a decade through the upper body. You can get some pretty gnarly wheels, daddy. And that's why I think it's a real status symbol because how you get big legs, bar some genetic exceptions, is by training fucking hard. That's why it's a badge of honor. It's just like taking a set to 1 RIR or 0 RIR on a leg press is a biblical experience when compared to doing the same on a tricep or a curl or even a shoulder press or a bench press. Taking something to 0 RIR on a bench press isn't that hard. We're not having to dig deep into our soul like we would on a hack squat or a leg press or a high rep squat set. So that's why I kind of view the big legs as a status symbol of effort, and it makes you look powerful. So I disagree with you. Certified cold take. Definitely hits the criteria for controversial though. I guess I get what you're saying is like if we really maximally develop as genetics depending as a natural lifter, lots of time people are going to end up looking a little lower body dominant. Because like I said, I think you can get really impressive wheels naturally just through training fucking hard, training reasonably smart, eating and sleeping like a hoss. So you could end up lower body dominant, but I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I think you look powerful. I think you look like you could hook a plow in a field and you could pull it yourself. No horse needed. Last one, mind muscle connection is overrated. More important to focus on progressive overload. I do not agree with you. I would say that if we're talking about, like, I talk often about being skilled at strength training on this channel. Presumably you're talking about being skilled at hypertrophy training. And I think that mind muscle connection is a pivotal part of being skilled at hypertrophy training. If we look at the people that are the best at eliciting a hypertrophy response from their muscles, they have a great mind muscle connection and they never lose it. So yeah, we should be looking to overload with time, but I don't think that should be coming at the cost of feeling it in the target muscle. Yeah, do we need to do these touchy-feely, squeezy exercises like this cross-body chest press or squeezing some plates together and pressing them? Yeah, we feel the muscle a lot, but there's no real overload component. Yeah, no, we don't want to prioritize this extreme mind-muscle connection over overloadability and range of motion. Sure, I agree with you there. But that being said, we should never be so hell-bent on the chasing this overload that we're not even feeling the target muscle. That's probably a sign that we could do better. And it's like someone said in the replies, these things aren't mutually exclusive either. We should probably get to the point, just like I talked about, strength athletes should have the intensity to push themselves and the discipline to fight to maintain their form. It's the same idea, is you should have the intensity to dig deep and overload, but that shouldn't mean you're throwing your mind-muscle connection out the window either. It's just like when people say, what's most important, diet, sleep, or the training? Well, if you do terrible at one of these things, you're going to be trash. So don't try to figure out which one's the most important one. Just try to do your best at all three. Kind of the same idea. If you never are feeling the target muscle, you're probably leaving a lot of growth on the table. And if you're never overloading, you're probably leaving a lot of growth on the table. Hey, let's just try to do both rather than try to guess which one's more important. I mean, I guess maybe the overload is more important, but like when you say overload, like, are we throwing form out the window too? If we're not feeling the target muscle, who knows? Thank you guys for watching. I believe this has been Hot and Cold Takes number 7. Appreciate you, boys.